Your body is betraying you right now and you have no idea it's happening. While you're sitting here watching this, a specific type of fat is wrapping itself around your liver, your pancreas, and your intestines. This isn't the fat you can pinch. This is visceral fat, and it's actively pumping inflammatory molecules into your bloodstream, disrupting your hormones, and setting you up for metabolic disease. The reason it's there has nothing to do with how much you ate yesterday. It's there because your body thinks you're in danger. Visceral fat is not passive storage. It's an active endocrine organ that responds to one master signal: cortisol. When cortisol stays elevated, your body doesn't just store fat randomly, it strategically deposits it deep in your abdomen, right next to the organs that need quick access to energy. This was brilliant evolutionary design 200,000 years ago, when you might actually face a lion. Today, when your biggest threat is a work deadline, this same mechanism is slowly destroying your health. Here's what makes this so insidious. Your belly fat has 4 times more glucocorticoid receptors than fat anywhere else on your body. These receptors act like magnets for cortisol. The more stress you experience, the more cortisol you produce, and the more aggressively your body funnels energy into visceral fat storage. You're not weak. You're not lacking discipline. You're fighting a hormonal signal that's as powerful as the drive to breathe. Research from Yale showed something startling. Lean women with excess abdominal fat had exaggerated cortisol responses to stress compared to lean women without belly fat. After just one stressful task, the women with visceral fat felt more threatened, performed worse, and secreted significantly more cortisol. The fat wasn't just a result of stress. It was amplifying the stress response itself, creating a self-perpetuating cycle. The mechanism works through multiple pathways simultaneously. When cortisol spikes, it triggers insulin release. Insulin is a storage hormone. Together, cortisol and insulin create the perfect metabolic storm for fat accumulation. At the same time, cortisol breaks down muscle tissue to convert it into glucose. Less muscle means lower metabolism. Lower metabolism means even easier fat gain. You're literally being restructured at the tissue level. But there's something most people don't realize about cortisol. It follows a precise 24-hour rhythm. It should peak sharply in the morning to wake you up, then decline steadily throughout the day, reaching its lowest point at night so you can sleep. This rhythm is controlled by your circadian clock, a cluster of neurons in your brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. When this clock is synchronized, your body knows when to burn energy and when to rest. When it's disrupted, cortisol stays elevated all day and night, and visceral fat accumulates relentlessly. Modern life destroys this rhythm. You wake up and immediately check your phone, flooding your brain with blue light and dopamine before your cortisol has naturally peaked. You drink coffee within minutes, blocking adenosine receptors and artificially spiking alertness. You skip breakfast or eat pure carbohydrates, sending your blood sugar on a roller coaster. By 9 a.m., you've already told your body that the environment is chaotic and unsafe. What happens next is biochemical. Your adrenal glands, sitting on top of your kidneys, start pumping out more cortisol to compensate for the perceived emergency. These glands run on sodium and potassium. When you're dehydrated from 8 hours of sleep and you don't replenish electrolytes, your blood becomes thick and viscous. Your heart works harder. This physical strain raises cortisol even before you've consciously experienced stress. You're starting the day in a deficit. The research on this is clear. Hypercortisolemia, whether from disease states like Cushing's syndrome or from chronic psychological stress, preferentially expands visceral fat depots. It's not just correlation. The mechanism has been mapped. Cortisol activates an enzyme called 11-beta-hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase type 1 specifically in abdominal fat tissue. This enzyme converts inactive cortisone into active cortisol, creating a local cortisol production factory right in your belly. Even if your systemic cortisol levels aren't extremely high, your visceral fat can be generating its own supply. School-related stress in adolescent girls has been shown to interact with cortisol awakening response to predict visceral fat accumulation. Girls with high morning cortisol spikes, who also experienced more school stress, accumulated significantly more visceral fat over time. The pattern starts young and compounds with age. By the time you're an adult dealing with work stress, relationship stress, and financial pressure, you're building on decades of dysregulated cortisol patterns. The food cravings you experience aren't random either. When cortisol rises, your brain releases neuropeptide Y, a molecule that specifically drives carbohydrate cravings. It's not willpower. It's ancient biology telling you that energy expenditure is high, and you need to refuel quickly. Cortisol also enhances the pleasure response from highly palatable foods. That's why the cookie tastes better when you're stressed. Your reward pathways are being hijacked by survival mechanisms that no longer serve you. The trap tightens further through something called the pregnenolone steal. Your body makes cortisol and sex hormones from the same precursor molecule, pregnenolone. When stress is chronic, cortisol production takes priority. Your testosterone and estrogen levels drop. Lower sex hormones mean less muscle mass, more fat storage, and reduced metabolic rate. You end up with the skinny fat phenotype. Thin limbs, but a distended belly. Your body is cannibalizing muscle from your arms and legs to feed the visceral fat around your organs. So how do you break free from this? The answer isn't more willpower or extreme dieting. Adding more stress to an already stressed system only makes things worse. What you need to do is send a specific signal to your nervous system that the emergency is over. You need to convince your biology that it's safe to unlock those deep energy reserves and actually use them. The first intervention happens the moment you wake up, and it has nothing to do with exercise or fasting. It starts with water and minerals. Within the first 10 minutes of waking, drink a large glass of room temperature water with a quarter teaspoon of high-quality sea salt and a squeeze of fresh lemon. This is your adrenal cocktail. The sodium immediately signals your kidneys that resources are abundant. When sodium is low, your body compensates by releasing aldosterone and additional adrenaline to maintain blood pressure. You're adding fuel to the cortisol fire before you've even opened your eyes. The lemon provides potassium, which balances the sodium and supports liver detoxification. This single action rehydrates your blood, reducing the physical strain on your cardiovascular system and dampening the morning cortisol spike by up to 20% according to recent studies on electrolyte timing and stress response. But hydration is only the foundation. The next step involves light, and this is where most people completely miss the mark. Your suprachiasmatic nucleus, the master clock in your brain, needs a clear signal that day has begun. Indoor lighting doesn't cut it. LED bulbs emit around 500 lux, which is biologically ambiguous. It's enough to suppress melatonin weakly, but not enough to trigger the full cortisol awakening cascade that should happen sharply and then drop off. You end up with a drawn-out cortisol elevation that lingers all morning. Get outside within 30 minutes of waking. Even on a cloudy day, natural sunlight delivers over 10,000 lux. You need 5 to 10 minutes of direct exposure without sunglasses. The photons hit your retina and travel straight to the hypothalamus, synchronizing your circadian rhythm. This sharp morning cortisol peak, when properly timed with light exposure, actually sets you up for lower baseline cortisol throughout the rest of the day. Studies on shift workers show that those who get morning light exposure have significantly lower afternoon cortisol levels and reduced visceral fat accumulation over time. You're not just waking up, you're programming your hormonal rhythm for the next 16 hours. Now comes the part that challenges most people. You need to delay your first coffee for 90 minutes after waking. The biochemistry here is precise. During sleep, your brain accumulates adenosine, the molecule that creates sleep pressure. When you wake, there's still residual adenosine floating in your system. Caffeine works by blocking adenosine receptors. Drink it immediately and you feel artificially alert, but the adenosine doesn't disappear. It accumulates behind a chemical dam. When the caffeine wears off around 2 in the afternoon, that dam breaks. You crash hard. Your body interprets this energy plummet as an emergency and releases more cortisol to compensate. By waiting 90 minutes, you allow your brain's glymphatic system to clear the adenosine naturally. Your natural cortisol awakening response runs its course without interference. When you finally drink coffee, it acts as a true performance enhancer rather than a desperate crutch. You get sustained energy without the afternoon crash that drives sugar cravings and activates visceral fat storage mechanisms. Research from the University of Sheffield tracked cortisol patterns in early caffeine consumers versus delayed consumers and found a 40% reduction in afternoon cortisol spikes in the delayed group. Movement comes next, but not the kind you've been told to do. High-intensity interval training in a fasted, stressed state can backfire. You're already cortisol elevated. Adding hypoxic stress from intense exercise pushes you further into emergency mode. What you need instead is forward ambulation, walking. Specifically, walking outdoors where you get optic flow, the visual phenomenon of images passing by your peripheral vision. This has a direct neurological effect on the amygdala, your brain's fear center. As landscapes move past your eyes, it signals to your ancient brain that you're exploring, hunting, moving with agency. You're not trapped. Studies using functional MRI scans show that optic flow during walking reduces amygdala activation by up to 30% within 10 minutes. Combine this with the morning light you're already getting, and you've created a double signal of safety. Your nervous system shifts from sympathetic, fight or flight, to parasympathetic, rest and digest. This is the only state where your body feels comfortable unlocking energy from visceral fat stores. You're not forcing fat loss through deprivation. You're permitting it through biological signaling. There's one final morning rule that might be the hardest. Do not touch your phone for the first 30 minutes. The moment you open social media or email, you flood your waking brain with reactive dopamine hits and cortisol triggers. You see problems, comparisons, demands from other people. Your sympathetic nervous system engages before you've even stood up. Research from Harvard Medical School shows that immediate phone use upon waking correlates with elevated cortisol that persists for up to 4 hours afterward. You're starting your day in defense mode, and your body responds by protecting its energy reserves. This entire protocol takes less than 40 minutes. Water with salt and lemon, 10 minutes of outdoor walking in natural light, 90-minute caffeine delay, no phone. Simple actions, but they address the root cause of why your body is storing visceral fat in the first place. You're not battling your biology anymore, you're working with it. The timeline for seeing results varies, but visceral fat is actually easier to mobilize than subcutaneous fat once the hormonal environment shifts. With consistent application of these morning signals, most people notice changes within 2 to 3 months. Cortisol patterns begin normalizing within days to weeks. You'll feel it before you see it. Better sleep, fewer cravings, more stable energy. Your body has been operating under the assumption that you're in constant danger. Every morning, you've been confirming that assumption with dehydration, artificial light, immediate caffeine, and digital stress. Now you're sending a different message. Resources are available, the environment is safe. It's time to burn stored energy instead of hoarding it. That's how you dismantle visceral fat. Not through punishment, but through permission. You're not fighting a weight problem. You're fighting a safety problem. Your body has been running emergency protocols for years, maybe decades, and visceral fat is the evidence. Every intervention we've discussed today addresses the same fundamental issue: convincing your biology that the threat has passed. Lower the cortisol, fix the signals, and the fat becomes negotiable. Start tomorrow morning. Water, light, movement, delayed caffeine. That's where the fortress begins to crack.